Welcome to tonight's debate. We have a very special debate tonight. It is our Godkin, which is our competition for novice speakers that has spoken for less than a year. So one of you will be crowned our Godkin champion at the end of the evening, so good luck to all of you. Before we get into that, do we have any council announcements this evening? Anyone have any announcements to make?
Yeah, give me a second, sorry.
No worries.
Get pizza. Okay, super. So next week is this house would make language learning compulsory. We still have 2 spaces open on the against making language learning compulsory. So if you were forced to do a GCSE in language you fucking hated, you didn't want to keep that experience, then sign up.
I'm also on that side, so...
Yeah, it's me and Kira against language learning. So if anyone wants to join us, please let me know after. And yeah, that's all for me.
I'm also prepped for this one version.
Any other council announcements quickly? No? Nobody? Okay, so we will move on to welcome the minutes from last week's debate, if Josie has them. If you want to come up.
Hello everyone. Sorry this week's minutes aren't going to be quite like the Trinity one, so I won't be sitting here just shitting on all the speakers tonight, but you know, I'll give it a good go. Anyway, on the 15th of November 2022, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 9th Ordinary Meeting for the 174th Session for the motion, "This House would leave the European Convention on Human Rights." Matthew Taylor began by giving a speech to the House in which he roasted our Supreme Leader Ryan Hoey HLM and various other members of the Society to fill. As usual, the meeting began with announcements. Ellie Byrne HLM announced the Godkin training session which would take place on the next Monday. Congratulations to our speakers tonight who made it through the first round, and good luck for this evening. After reading the minutes, the meeting moved to private members' business. Ellie Byrne HLM presented Matt Hancock's appearance in I'm a Celebrity. Responses were heard by Owen Usher, Noah Barnley, Dermot Hamill, Jamie Warren, HLM? No, Jamie Warren, no, never mind. Soon to be HLM. Harry Shaw, Ethan McCartney, Jack Hanlon, and President Emeritus Danny McCormick. President's questions then took place. Matthew Taylor insisted that the House berates the acting president, exacting his revenge for the last 9 weeks. Matthew Taylor then proposed that the House extended the President's questions to 5 minutes. This was seconded by Dermot Hamill and unanimously passed. Mr. President, you may regret this action tonight. John Lavery then asked the acting president how he felt about democracy considering the current circumstances. Supreme Leader Ryan Hoey HLM Esquire pleaded the fifth. After President's questions, the vote of prior opinion was held. There were 8 votes for aye, 32 votes for nay, and 16 abstentions, so the opposition had it. First on the proposition was Jamie Warren, which I put down as HLM, sorry. First, Jamie argued that the ECHR has historically been ineffective. Despite being drafted after World War II, it had very little effect on the Soviet treatment of its citizens. Leaving the ECHR would restore parliamentary sovereignty through the establishment of our own Bills of Rights. Jamie proposed that Brussels bureaucracy is detrimental to democracy as we know it. Leaving will mean that the UK can mediate the implications of Brexit on its own terms. First in the opposition, giving his maiden speech, was Noah Barnley. First, Noah stated that whilst the ECHR is not perfect, there are no strong alternatives which can hold up against the current system we have today. Noah cited the 2003 Communication Act implemented by the UK government, in which grossly offensive speech online was banned. When looking back to the Cultural Revolution in China, banning offensive speech progressed in censoring free speech. The ECHR is a fine check on government actions to prevent similar violations on our freedom of speech from happening here. If we leave, our government may turn on us. Second on the proposition was Cormac McSparren. Cormac first presented the way in which human rights have been the core of our being, increasing and waning throughout history. The ECHR was established to enshrine vital rights across Europe. However, we should be asking whether it has been an effective tool in maintaining them. The court has been a victim of its own success. With 60,000 new cases being lodged every year, it is compelled to do too much. This led to a delay in major cases being investigated. Second on the opposition was Rory McSparran. Rory proposed that the ECHR's reason for being established should be the principal reason for not leaving. The ECHR was formed because of the mass ethnic cleansing of Nazi Germany. This convention, therefore, has been created not only to protect the rights of all countries in the Council, but to prevent mass genocide from ever taking place again. He then went on to state that the convention is not outdated, as it is constantly being amended. It is ultimately living legislation. The final speaker for the proposition, giving his maiden speech, was Gary So. Gary approached the podium wearing a Union Jack tie and blazer. Wolf whistles were heard from the members of the House. After putting on his Nigel Farage mask, Gary depicted the ECHR as being a kraken, wrapping its tentacles around the proverbial balls of the UK, dictating the limited rights we can practice. He argued that the Commission is un-British, subjecting ourselves to a new level of colonialism, with Brussels being our colonizers. The ECHR acts as the ceiling and not the floor for the development of human rights. The final speaker for the opposition was Kira Swale HLM. She first stated that the claims of the ECHR being undemocratic were unsubstantiated. Despite the proposition claiming that it is un-British, the Commission was supported by the UK during its establishment and was one of the founding members of the court. Kira cited many successful reforms implemented by the ECHR, ranging from anti-discrimination, LGBTQ+ rights policies in Northern Ireland to the protection of religious rights. Questions were heard from Ellie Byrne HLM, Daniel Toft and Daniel McCormick. Following the debate and questions from the House, the vote of speakerability took place. There were 9 votes for the proposition, 22 votes for the opposition, and 11 abstentions, so the opposition had it. May I take the minutes as read?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. It's now my pleasure to welcome private members. Yes, private members. Oh, good. We've got plenty of time, don't worry. So I will just start the timer here quickly. Good for 20 minutes. Okay, I'll take this first. State your name for the minutes, please.
So the UK Supreme Court has ruled that the Scottish independence referendum that was pushed by Nicola Sturgeon is unlawful. I just wanted to gather the House's thoughts on whether or not Westminster is denying a legitimate, shall we say, vote on independence, despite the fact that in 2015 this issue was arguably settled.
Thoughts on the Scottish independence? Yes, state your name for 2 minutes, please.
Tom Burns. I don't think, to be honest, there was going to be, I don't think anyone would have been expecting any other outcome from the Supreme Court. I think it's fairly settled that this is not, referenda aren't an issue for devolved legislatures, it's purely a Westminster issue. I think this was primarily pushed as a bit of a play by the Scottish Government to show that Westminster is out of touch with what Scotland wants. I think this honestly God in the long term will benefit the push for Scottish independence rather than hamper it. And I think it just depends on how the SNP play it and how the Tories play it in the next few months or few years, and it's the biggest difference.
Thank you. Yes, state your name for minutes, please.
Oh, no, sure. The issue was not settled in 2014. The issue was put to a vote in 2014. What's changed since then that would have swapped, like, 5% of the population to vote for independence? Where, like, one of the most offensive things I saw in the Supreme Court's decision was that the question had already been answered for a generation. The question was not answered for a generation. The question became even more contentious for a generation. So, you know, yeah.
State your name for minutes, please.
Luke McGuire. I think it's wonderful that a brilliant institution has finally saw fit to overthrow what could be seen as a democratic possibility of independence. After all, democracy and freedom should be opposed wherever they're found.
Yes, State your name for the minutes, please.
Right, first, on the points about it being settled for a generation, that was obviously the words of Nicola Sturgeon before she lost the last referendum. And the whole argument of, well, we've had Brexit since, was an argument that played out in the Scottish referendum of 2014, in which the Scottish Nationalists said, you know, if we leave the UK, then we can. That if we stay in the UK, then there's a possibility that the UK could leave the EU, and still the Scottish people voted to remain. And it is a reserved matter, and the argument of the SNP has a mandate for this, and the argument the SNP has a mandate for this. You can't have a mandate on something over which you have no competence. It'd be like, say, it's like the SNP running on getting rid of Trident in Scotland. It's a reserved matter, so you can't have a mandate on it. And also, the opinion polls still show, despite what the SNP would say, that the
You've got 20 seconds before I cut you off.
That the opinion polls still show that the majority of people in Scotland actually don't want a referendum and actually don't want independence.
I have to come to this side of the room. Yes.
I'm going like this.
I'll go this side first. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
First of all, the irony of the, I'm sorry, Ryan, but the English person talking about referendums in your country or Northern Ireland. Second, I think a country should have a right to dictate when it wants independence because Scotland is its own country. Third, saying that the Brexit was around, like we knew Brexit was going to happen in 2014, Scotland still voted to remain in Brexit. And third off, none of us saw the shit show that was coming with Brexit, including Northern Ireland with the protocol. It is a completely different deal than what anyone was offered or what was said. What was said is completely different to what we've got. I think it's not allowing Scotland to choose when they have their own independence is A, because England's scared that Scotland will leave, that they're getting a lot from Scotland being in the Union, although they're not getting that back to Scotland, which is why Scotland wants to leave. The Tories are super confident and they don't practice democracy, just handing their mates prime minister roles left and right, but they don't want to be part of that. And so they viewed this jurisdiction, and I don't think that saying that 2014 Brexit was talked about means it's fair or that it's set for a generation, and I think it's actually very democratically wrong that they can't decide when to have a referendum.
I have the best.
So we'll go to this side of the house.
Jimmy Ward, so I just wanted to firstly address the one's comment about not only being settled for a generation. The vote was intentionally lowered to the age of 16 in the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. If someone was 16 and voted in that referendum, 8 years old, and only 24, I don't exactly think that going from like some prepubescent slug to being some kind of university.
What the hell is happening? What is happening?
I think that just quite frankly refutes your point.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Jumpy man. I'd like to note on several points. First of all, look, it's describing the Supreme Court as a glorious institution being created by that Blair entry. On the point that conditions have changed, yeah, even if we voted to remain in the EU, conditions would change. Do you honestly believe the SNP would have been like, well, we voted to remain, that's the question settled, we're never going to talk about it again? It's a bit like, a child who wants something for Christmas, and everybody just shut up about it. I am the best, I can say this because I am partially Scottish, so I can say this. Scotland is, they would get, to be honest, the SNP would get angry about anything. They could get angry, they'd say they'd blame the English for anything. You'd say they'd blame the English for sunlight, happiness, a lack of Aaron's Brew in Aberdeen. I don't know. Quite frankly, regardless of what happens, the SNP will get angry, they'll blame the English for it, and demand another referendum. When they lose that one, they'll demand the next one because the sun is now going slightly down. The conditions have changed and they demand another referendum. Give me a break.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Oh, no, sure, again. I'm very different from where I was 8 years ago. let's say. No, but like let's say in the South that the referendum to get rid of abortion rights had failed, we'd be running that again within 2 years. Conditions change all the time, so I don't agree with that argument. Just don't agree with that specific argument.
Clarification.
Is it a point of clarification?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm fairly sure that the Dáil loves the referendums. They would literally have a referendum whether to have.
That's not a point of clarification. Anyone? Yes. Yeah. If you finishing?
Yeah, just finishing. Secondly, the SNP does not have a monopoly on Scottish independence. The same way Sinn Féin does not have a monopoly on Irish reunification.
Say your name for the minutes, please.
As someone that raised the Luton Airport, on James' point, I think we should blame the English more.
Any further? Anything else? That's the final move, right? Any further points that are unrelated to this? Oh my God. Yes. Stay for the minutes, please.
Luke McGuire. Yes. In case you didn't realise or whatever, the Donald is back, baby. We're back in business. Who loves you, baby? What's everybody's thoughts?
It's the suit that does something.
He's a different man, I swear. Yes. Quiet, please. Yep. State your name for the minutes, please.
Jack Hamlin. Can we raise some kind of vote so that Luke doesn't get to wear the suit anymore? It's still like some kind of weird power that he didn't have before.
Any actual points on? Yes. State your name for the minutes, please.
I would like the second.
Well, there is. Not actually.
Actually, with the condition that he's not allowed to wear a suit without a proper shirt. I'll take it. But he needs to wear a proper shirt.
Seeing as that has actually been seconded, that actually has to be a vote. If you're in favour of banning Luke McGuire from wearing a suit, you can raise your hand now. If you're against the motion, you can raise your hand now. Yes. If you want to abstain, you can raise your hand now. So please don't wear a suit again. This is binding. I said it. Can we get back on topic, please? Yes.
On the point of Trump back on Twitter, I in my opinion, the most interesting Trump tweet. I would like to extend my best wishes to all, even the haters and losers, on this special day, September 11th.
Yes. Stay your name for the minutes, please.
Whenever Elon Musk decided to bring people back with his own messages, Twitter is going down to the shitter.
I don't have it on me, sorry.
The one thing I was happy about, because I've now seen that I can't, even if I block people, people who I do not follow and I do not like, just keep them on my Twitter feed now. It's like it's actually advertising it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm down Twitter too much.
The links at the end, I very much do not want to see. I'm glad that Trump is not there, because he is still on his new 4chan that he made.
It's Truth Social.
He said he doesn't feel the need to comment on Twitter, so there's one win.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Kirsten. Basically, what about the kind of aspect of it being biased, I find it very interesting because essentially at this accusation, Elon Musk was like, oh no, there's going to be a committee with very varied, viewpoints that will decide before I reconvene anyone, which we all know is absolute nonsense, because essentially if anyone disagrees with Elon Musk, they get fired. It's very well known. Second of all, and the bias was shown essentially when he brought back, he wanted to bring back Trump, but he didn't want to bring back Alex Jones because basically, according to him, he saw he saw his child die in his arms, so that he will never like bring back someone who mocked child death or something. And people were like, okay, fair enough, don't bring Alex Jones back, but you clearly just did it because you personally disagree with it, which just shows your bias, which I think is quite interesting anyway.
Last point on this one, yes, state your name for minutes again.
James Orchin, in case you forgot. Did you know that? Did you know that a few months ago, Twitter was a place where there was no wrong. Everyone was happy. No one ever got angry. There was no banning. There was no banning. And then he appeared, and all bad stuff happened. Because of course, I'm to be honest with you, yeah, we can complain what Elon Musk is doing, but I mean, like, Twitter was a bed of roses beforehand.
No, that's not though.
It's like
saying,
have
like,
you seen certain
it's like
Twitter
saying that
accounts?
we're just complaining about the UK because Brexit happened. Like, the UK was shit before Brexit, but it's even shit. Do you know what I mean? Twitter's the same.
Any other points unrelated to this?
Matthew, I need to address a serious issue.
Yeah.
So what do you address Dermot's point about making a joke about 9/11? That is completely uncalled for.
That was
Any sort of
No.
joke out of that is not.
He was
really
Quiet. Dermot, will you retract the point?
Yes, I'll try.
Thank you. Right. Any further points unrelated to this? Yes.
Jack Allen. I was walking down the street the other day.
Sorry.
I know I'm sorry. I do leave the house.
Sorry.
Surprise you, but I was walking down the street the other day. I was outside Ulster Hall, and like I had a radio presenter with like a thing. I don't know, a microphone. And he came up. Thanks. He came up and gave me an on-the-street interview about the Ireland Future conference that was being held in Ulster Hall, and I was there just before the counter-protesters were there before. But he was telling me that apparently the PSNI had an elevated police presence of, and I saw it with my own eyes, there was at least 6 Land Rovers around the corner sitting there, and beforehand they were checking every single public bin and phone booth in the local vicinity for bombs. Does anybody else in the House agree that this is completely disproportionate a response to a simple United Ireland conference?
Yes, state your name for minutes, please.
Me? Oh. Yeah, sorry. Well, I think that in respect to everything that's happened more recently, I don't think that it's just because it was an Ireland Future conference or anything like that. With the recent things that have been happening up in Derry and Amsterdam, I think that a heightened police presence, you're going to get it anywhere. I mean, even if it's a conference or if it's a concert, you know, I mean, maybe there was a bit much because it was a political event, but I think that just an increased police presence is going to be something that we're going to see in the next few months, given the increased risk.
Yeah. Thank you. You had your hand up. Do you want to still make a point? Yes? Can you state your name for the minutes first?
You can't saying that it's just because it's a big ethnic concert. You can't deny that the Douglas paramilitaries have been getting a lot bigger over the recent years, especially with issues like the protocol. And Irish Unity is definitely considered more contentious because of that. So definitely you can't just say it's not because there's a massive effect.
Yes, state your name for the
I
minutes.
kind of want to clarify the point that you're making when you bring that up is you're saying like, oh, it's because it's a nationalist thing, and it's or a broadly say nationalist thing is that you're sitting there going, and so they were checking for the presence of bombs. What are you implying? Like, is it that they wouldn't have it at a
From what I was told by this presenter as well, apparently they were also like searching members that were entering the conference hall, whether that's true or not.
Because of what's happening, I just want to reiterate what Sam had said before. I just want to reiterate what Sam had said before about the massive amount of violence or the massive spike in violence that's happened in Strabane and in Derry. In particular in Strabane, they've been going around, they check every single car going in and out of Strabane all day, every day. A friend, the boy I live with, his mother goes in and out of Strabane every day going to work, and she gets stopped leaving and stopped coming back. And so it's not like this is a, I don't know, it kind of sounded like we were making it out to be a politically charged thing in that sense, you know. It doesn't seem to be like that.
Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Kelly Byrne, Rachel Lennon. Again, saying, unless I misunderstand the whole issue, but I don't feel that that's a negative on two nationalists, like they're accusing. I think it's more for their safety because of, as we've seen, there's been petrol bombs, there's been, what was it, like loads of arms seized and petrol bomb stuff seized as well. And also from my own experience from living in Shankill, whenever there'd be in like the Spectrum Centre, like a political UDP, TUV or DUP conference, which was like every week, just local members, the whole area, despite it being a paramilitary controlled area, the whole area would be covered in police as if it was like a parade, and all bins, all things checked. Every member going into the Spectrum and out of the Spectrum would be checked and patted down. Like I was always in the Spectrum Centre, so it was really annoying when I'm going to cadets. So I had a uniform in my bag, and then having to go into an event where they're checking people for bombs and weapons, and you have that in your bag. It's not that great. Especially when no one has said to the police that there's a cadet event there, so I'm going with a military uniform. Not looking great on my part, but just from my understanding of what I've heard of the situation, obviously I wasn't there, I don't actually think that it is an attack on nationalists or calling or like implying that they are a problem or terrorists in that kind of way. I think it's more just because of the risk of violence and the protests we've seen in areas like mine with bus burning and stuff, and again, I think it's just safety measures, and I think it's just more a safety thing.
Yes.
Jimmy Ward. So, if you're complaining about a heavy police presence as being a negative at an Adams Future conference, you're very quick to forget the lack of PSNI presence at the funeral of Bobby Story. So, how can you explain away that?
Yes, stay here for the minutes. Spicy tonight.
I was looking at, we were walking down because I was going to Christmas markets because that German beer is fucking class. And we were going, and there was like 6 or 7 Land Rovers, load of cops in unmarked cars, couple of marked cars, load of cops on the street. And I'm going, I don't know what this is about. Remember the Ireland Future thing was on? I'm going, am I going to get stopped here? I started to freak out. And then I seen like the counter protest that was there, and there was a man, it was really Ireland wide, 2 Ireland guys, and out one, a couple of flags, and there was an aisle full of standing, looking out like leaflets, and the leaflets I flicked through, there were pre-Queen death, because it said God Save the Queen lyrics inside, proper like promotional stuff, it was like score, but for loyalism, but also like, and I feel like it's a net gain for me because I now have a book that is the lyrics of the Sash My Father Wore, which I've been singing non-stop for the last few days.
I have never been more uncomfortable about this private members business than I ever been. Like the amount of stuff.
Did you get President's questions?
No, I think we just skip that. I've given you so much time here. I think there's no real point going there. So yes, final point on this.
All right, Terence, now just in the interest of a little bit of equality here, I was parked down in Dublin 93, 94. I remember being pulled over by a series of Gardaí in the middle there, hauled out, and my wife had her breasts, sorry. My wife was still breastfeeding our child at the time, and there was all sorts of interrogations as if, what are you doing down here? Why is that child out? What is your business in this part of Dublin at that time? So just to say, this is not something that is exclusively focused on Northern Ireland. Let's spread that police brutality about.
Right. Any final points that's unrelated to this? One more point to fire. Yes.
I just want to
make
a
quick one if possible.
I just want to ask the household what they think about the RBT strikes, especially when he's going to be affected by them, like the English. How many citizens from Scotland here?
I'll take 2, yes.
So on strikes in general, the nurses are going on a national strike for the first time, and extremely historic and well fucking done because they hate it. I'm sorry, I'm in person here today.
Thank you, James. This brought you immense joy, didn't it?
I would also like to reiterate strikes. Support your posties in Northern Ireland, support your housing executives in Northern Ireland, support your nurses in Northern Ireland, support your transit workers in Northern Ireland. There's 18 industries in Northern Ireland that are going on strike the next 3 months. Strikes that are happening all over the country, and it's working class people who strikes, and I would like to just say, it will cause disturbance in our lives. Yes, that is the point of the strike.
Point
But
of clarification, can't use private members' business to promote political agenda.
This is not political agenda. Come on, it's not. It's not a political party point.
This multiple times, so I don't see how this is an issue.
Can you get back to your point? Sorry.
So what do you call it? I just would like people to know that the problem isn't with the strikers, it is with the companies they're striking about.
One more point on this. Yes. Yes.
So, about the strikes, and if they risk coming here, I mean, I really don't think it's going to affect us too much, because if anyone's ever used a train or a bus, we will see absolutely no difference. It will still not turn up. There will still be perhaps the odd grumpy driver in a fleece that smells of stale cigarettes, and nothing turns up anyway, and if it does, it's on fire. So, we can just move on.
My train was 20 minutes late getting here.
Exactly.
So there you go, that's the problem.
Useless. One sentence.
No, definitely not. No.
You've still got
I've still as close. I mean, yes, last point. One sentence.
At least the trains ran on time.
And on that, it's my displeasure to turn to President's questions.
This is going to be the worst one. The worst.
Why? What have you started here? Are you starting a coup? Is that what it is? Okay, right. Yes.
Mr. President, there's been considerable talk in recent days about the society acquiring a sword. As a result, Mr. President, I've done some research.
Yes.
I find potential investment opportunities. It's on Gumtree, and somebody's selling a replica of a Japanese samurai sword. It's £150. It's not just the sword. It comes with an anime body pillow as well. And you're thinking, no, £150, that's quite cheap. It's because they're both used.
James.
President, be open to investment.
No. James, I am sure both would be of immense use, and you really want both those items. But I'm sorry that is. If you're willing to pull it out of are we genuinely having a vote on buying sword? Right. Count. My resignation is imminent at this point. Who wants to take over from me? If you're in favour of buying this, this fucking sword. If you want the fucking sword, put your hand up now. If you're against, that's included. Right, fine. Can we move on from this point? Who else has a question? No, I'm sorry. Point of order. I'm out of desperation. Yes.
Okay. Mr. President, as you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been going through some very difficult times recently, and people are saying the box office returns are getting lesser, creativity is dead in Hollywood, nepotism babies are going everywhere with the newest movies made, and we're seeing a lack of creativity across all the creative arts. So taking all that into consideration, what is your opinion on the current war in Ukraine?
I'm not responding to that point. Yes. Quiet, please.
Given the current war in Ukraine, what's your opinion on the Marvel
I'm trying to remember the last film I seen from the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I can't remember the last one.
Probably like
an announcement video.
Oh my god. The second Ant-Man film was quite good. I quite enjoyed that, but I haven't seen anything since then. No, absolutely not. Yes.
Given the second Ant-Man film, what did you have for breakfast, Mr. President?
I had return to your seat, James. I had Weetabix for breakfast this morning. Yes. Is that what you're going to eat? Right. Yes. We're never going to finish this debate.
See, you have Weetabix, but that's not the question. How did you have your Weetabix?
I've answered this about 4 times. I have it with milk and warm. Yes, heat it up, yeah.
And milk, no sugar, no honey.
Sugar? In your Weetabix? No.
Oh, honey.
No, just on its own.
Do you not even have the protein
Weetabix, Mr. President.
What is a protein Weetabix? What?
Unreal. They're like these big chips. Oh, you put sugar on them?
No, I don't have those.
They're so good.
They are so good.
I second that. I second to it also, man.
No, we're not having a third vote. Come down. If there's any more, I'll take them. If not, I will move on to the first. Yes. Oh, no, we're not going.
Semi-skimmed or
Semi-skimmed. Any final points? Your last chance possible. Oh, there actually is one. Yes. I mean, it's probably the only goal they're going to score all tournament, so at least something. Right. So it is now my pleasure to welcome the vote on prior opinion. Finally, thank God for this debate. If you're in favour of what is the motion? If you regret the Enlightenment, put your hand up now.
Luke?
Yeah, it's voting for our opinion.
Oh, yes, you hate modernity and all the people.
7. 8. I didn't see them. 7. If you don't regret the Enlightenment, put your hand up now.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17,
18. If you're abstaining, put your hand up now.
If you think it's a random sort of hand.
Harry's assistance.
11.
Oh yeah.
Do we have the numbers?
There were 7 votes for proposition, 18 votes for the opposition, and 11 abstentions. So far the opposition have it.
Thank you. It is now. Yeah, next. My pleasure to welcome the first speaker for the proposition tonight, Owen Usher.
Right, 2 seconds. Oh, Jesus Christ.
This is relevant, give me a second. So, hold on, Matthew, I'll do this. Sorry.
I'll turn the lights on.
No, I'll turn them on there in a sec, give me a second.
It's dramatic.
It's dramatic thing, sorry.
Jesus Christ.
So, 3, 2, 1. So I'm aware that a lot of you in this room don't know what the Enlightenment is. So that's the first question I have to ask. You walk into a room and it's dark. You are enlightened. If only Buddhism was that easy. No, but to be in all seriousness, I'm aware that I have to explain to you what the Enlightenment is. It's a very complicated topic. It took me 12 weeks of education, and I still have no idea really what I'm talking about in regards to it. But in all seriousness, the Enlightenment describes a cultural revolution which occurred in Europe throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, the ripples of which would go on to transform the whole globe. The whole continent was sucked up into this beautiful epoch of reason, of liberty, of progress, of fraternity, of constitutional government. Well, that's what we'd really like to believe, because the Enlightenment also saw the explosion of European colonialism, which although had previously occurred in the name of the Christian God, mostly against people who had varying opinions, variants of that God, as well as the Irish, it now spread throughout the world with scientific rationale. We could argue more so that the Enlightenment really didn't end. We live under constitutional governments, well, in the South we do at least. We have great concern for human happiness, for civil rights, all these other wonderful products of that time. The argument of this side is not that we forget the past. It is that the Enlightenment is something we as a society currently hold on a pedestal. And just like the divine right of kings, we must now look back, understand the fallacies and dangers of that mode of thinking and move on. The opposition is indeed right on one thing, that the Enlightenment was a necessary step in the advancement of humanity. It was also a brutal, unfeeling time in our history that saw violence unlike anything that had been seen hitherto. I would ask you to place this in context, to understand those excesses, and finally to imagine something new, something greater, something we can move towards together. Luke will go on to explain about how the Enlightenment is a vacuum of value, And I think that's a very good, apt description. The Enlightenment is as much of a church as anything Catholic. Instead of saints, you have the great intellectuals. Rousseau, Kierkegaard, Diderot, Kant. Eventually you end up with Hegel, like Olkin there will finish with. Instead of God or Mary of Christ, or Christ, we have these great spirits of logic and reason. They built churches to these concepts in France, for example. It's a church of the mind, typically, but a church nonetheless. And this church evolved from the churches that came before, and the excesses of those institutions came with it. These could not be discarded, because despite what the opposition would have you believe, the Enlightenment was not a movement of pure reason. Reason was the god of enlightenment, but human beings cannot truly be reasonable. That is against human nature. The age of the Enlightenment snapped shut at the end of the long 18th century with the defeat of Napoleon. By Napoleon's own words, he fought not to expand France's borders, but her Enlightenment ideals. And he did, in a war that caused the deaths of around 6 million people at a time when world population was just starting to hit 1 billion. Because it was not just logic and reason that emerged from the Enlightenment. Ambition boldly strides forward and takes the stage. Logic and reason might be the gods of this movement, but it is ambition that is the prophet. One man's ambition led to the Napoleonic Wars, that great war of the Enlightenment. A world that has been thrown on its head, descended into chaos. And here one man looked through an Enlightenment lens and decided that his own ambition trumped all else. His logic and reason, the power of his humanist mind, that is what led to Napoleon. And that was directly inspired by intellectuals of the Enlightenment. And to relentless ambition, like that man had, the world itself is not enough. I ask you to remember this when we think about regretting the Enlightenment. I ask you to imagine a world where instead of this blind logic and reason outlook, we understand the limitations of the human mind, where we look to the human spirit for answers, where we ignore this vacuum of value. The history of mankind can be said to be the history of man discovering, creating, and perfecting himself. In other words, it is the history of the creation of the human being who continuously discovers and develops in himself the powers and skills peculiar to himself. It can also be called the history of innovation, by a human being who has steadily refined himself in the political and ideological, cultural and moral, scientific and technological dimensions. Through the effort of creation and innovation, mankind has ushered in the age of the rocket, computers, genetic engineering, and the Green Revolution.
Sorry, the Enlightenment has brought all of these things. I don't understand what side you're taking here with this.
But the Enlightenment didn't lead to all these things. These things emerged out of things that had been inspired by the Enlightenment. But you're saying that we should just hold the Enlightenment here, that it can't change. That was what that point was about. It was about how everything has to change. We need to continuously develop ourselves. The opposition would have us to the same tired ideas that have brought us death and destruction. The opposition would have you stand firm on the path we have tread 1,000,000 times and tread there 1,000,000 more. The proposition would not have you forget the past. That is not what this debate is about. That would be nonsensical. Our path is the one we can take together to find a brighter future, where the human spirit and ideal can be perfected.
On that point, have you completely misread the motion?
This House regrets the Enlightenment.
You're saying that we have all said that we're like in favour of stagnating the Enlightenment. We haven't said that whatsoever, and the motion doesn't indicate that whatsoever.
The motion is this House will regret the Enlightenment. This House regrets the Enlightenment, yes? Rhetorical, sorry, rhetorical. But how else are you going to say that you're not going to regret the Enlightenment? We are holding ourselves currently to an illogical spirit of reason. The Enlightenment didn't really end. The way that we treat ourselves and the way we treat each other is based on that. I'm asking you to move on, to regret this. The excesses of the past do not need to inform the progress of the future. This bizarre link the opposition would have us hold ourselves to, from a philosophy 400 years old, that hurts us. We need to move on, move forward. We need to look to see what it is about the world that we can improve, not look to the past to find the answers to difficult questions that face us today. Because our post-Enlightenment minds, still looking to that period as a beautiful thing, threaten to lose what makes us human. We live in an enlightened world. Live out of time.
Sorry, you're not allowed to make any points of information for the audience because it's being judged. I apologise that you said that, sorry.
So we need to, sorry, that's after throwing me off. We need to move on from the past. We need to take a step forward. We need to look to the human spirit to answer questions, not to an illogical human mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. It's now my pleasure to welcome the first speaker, Tom Burns. Mr. President, members of the proposition, members of the opposition, members of the House, the Enlightenment birthed the bedrock of the world that we have today. It brought logic, reason, exploration, the pursuit of knowledge, and the infamous favourite of this great society, constitutional governance. It brought the world out of the darkness and into the light. To regret the Enlightenment is to regret the development of art, of music, of science, of thought, of discovery, of the progression of humanity as a whole. The Enlightenment was our great psychological advancement, the Darwinian evolution of man for the mind. It allowed the change that we have seen. It did not bring the change itself, but it allows us to have the change that we have seen. Without it, the world would be a worse place. My colleagues, Katie and Jack, will expand on these with a more philosophical view, while Dermot will look at the freedom from religion which the Enlightenment has gifted us, and probably say something about rats in Donnybrook as well, I don't know. In the late 17th century, European society reckoned with a sea change, the likes of which we'd not seen since the Renaissance 400 years before. Following the English Civil War, the coronation of the King of Bling, Charles II, signalled a return to autocratic, divinely righteous and preordained leadership. Political thinkers at the time began to ponder whether or not there was an alternative, something better than governance by decree from a bewigged party animal, whose only achievement remains really being inspiration for the best horror history song that there is. These inspired philosophers wanted a new world, free from political tyranny and putting personal freedoms at its heart. Writers like Locke strongly advocated for the separation of church and state, balanced against religious tolerance and respect, and for governments to recognise and uphold the rights of its citizens. Now Jack and Dermot will move on to this in more detail later on. He advocated for, Rousseau argued for personal political sovereignty, believing that man was innately free and rational. He wanted a respected rule of law upheld by democratic governments. Now this may seem obvious to us now, but that shows the power that the Enlightenment had. The idea is now normal that we are born free thinkers, each of us all possessing an untold capability, limitless potential, and to be protected and nurtured by government, by the people, of the people, and for the people. This sentiment has echoed across 400 years of human and political progression, and we can still hear it today. Even when it may seem quieter than ever, like the bells of freedom and possibility ring hollow, as the calls of autocracy and religious fundamentalism grow louder, its strength and longevity remain. Now I know that the classical liberal philosophy is not something that we all prescribe to, but from this school of thought came our contemporary political spectrum, a critical cornucopia from left to right. What the Enlightenment did was it opened the public sphere to free and open debate of ideas, without the looming threat of beheading at the whims of a guy in a crown with a gene pool smaller than the average resident of Bushmills. Without it, we would still be living under this divine, unquestionable, ruthless and absolute monarchy. Not only did the Enlightenment bring a revolution in political thought, but it changed the trajectory of discovery in this world forever.
Point of information.
Sure.
The majority of monarchs, of Enlightenment monarchs, were absolute monarchs.
Yes, but the point of the Enlightenment was a philosophical one rather than a complete revolutionary change across the world. It changed the thinking behind it, which then led to the turn down of monarchistic power. Now, the development of rational thinking, reason and logic disproved superstition in the scientific sphere. No longer were medical recovery seen as miracles. No longer were ailments curses from below. The evolution of science led us to a whole new world of understanding and exploration, demystifying many of the great ethereal wonders of the world. No thanks. It gave us Sir Isaac Newton, and if the proposition doesn't care for that, it is clear that they don't see the gravity of that situation.
On that point?
And clap for that at least, no? Sure. Thank you.
Talk about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton wasn't a scientist, he was a self-proclaimed alchemist.
Okay. But it brought the alchemists like Sir Isaac Newton. Newtonian empiricism, which was the scientific byproduct of Newton, brought with it answers, hypotheses, theories, and indeed more questions, just about quenching our thirst for knowledge, but never fully satisfying us with the final product. Modern science is never finished, there's always more to know, but it undoubtedly started with the Enlightenment. Now, the impact on religion in this era cannot be ignored, and will be talked about in more detail later, but it can also not be over-exaggerated. The freedom of debate and discussion brought by the Enlightenment naturally brings sparring on the role, types, and even necessary existence of religion in society and in power. The rise of reason and rationality was at loggerheads with religion, and did lead to cynicism, agnosticism, and atheism in many, but by no means destroyed religion. Religious worship was, and still is, widely practiced, and still plays a vital part in the lives of many. The Enlightenment opened up religion to scrutiny for the first time,
forcing people to face their beliefs, resulting in some turning away and others finding more strength than ever. The Enlightenment didn't destroy religion, it tempered it, it balanced it against other values, and I believe for the better. Now, a lot of this may sound lofty and elitist, but given our travels as a society in the last week, it appears that lofty and elitist is the style du jour of university debating in this island. But the philosophical, political, and scientific endeavours and explorations weren't as exclusionary as you may think. The increasing popularity of publishing at low cost opened this journey of discovery to the wider population. Unlike the pre-Enlightenment age where the landed gentry and those in the king's favour held monopoly on patronage of study, no thanks, the discoveries of the Enlightenment were widely available, opening debate and free thought to all. The greatest revolution in the Enlightenment was not found on the streets of America or in the boulevards of France, but in the minds of those around it. Now, while I was writing this speech, I couldn't help but think of the famous Monty Python sketch, in which a crowd of angry radicals, there's a point in this, are plotting against the Romans, and their leader, played by John Cleese, asks, well, what have the Romans ever done for us? And this then leads to a very long list of advantages that was brought by Rome, and includes aqueducts, education, sanitation, roads, and of course, wine. Now, the sketch captures the tensions between huge cultural change and the practical benefits that can be brought with it. And this is what the Enlightenment heralded: a revolutionary change in society, which there is no doubt many would have been uncomfortable with at the time. But as it moved away from absolute monarchy, unbridled, unattainable wealth, restricted education and superstition, it brought debate, freedom, political reform, scientific discovery, widespread learning. It brought Newton, Locke, Kant, Descartes, Voltaire, Wollstonecraft, these will be mentioned later on. It brought representative republics. It allowed change for the better. The change and development mentioned by proposition was a product of the Enlightenment. Without it, we would be in the self-same dark room in which we began. Now, anyone who's spoken to me for more than probably 10 minutes in the pub will know that my favourite TV show of all time is The West Wing, because I'm a politics student and that's it. So I want to leave you with a quote from the character Sam Seaborn, which I believe can encapsulate the Enlightenment and its impact on society better than I ever could. He says, "We came out of the cave, and we looked over the hill, and we saw fire. And we crossed the ocean, and we pioneered the west, and we took to the sky. The history of man is hung on a timeline of exploration, and this is what's next." Thank you.
I did not get through to this round of Godkins, but through a miracle of chance, I have been allowed to speak here, and now I'm about to make it all of your problem. These are my notes. As you can see, they are not extensive, but I assure you I can wrench a good rant from all of them. As my introduction, I think I'm going to use these as chapter titles, actually, because, you know, they each evoke very strong emotions. We have Paglia, Witches, Gay, Kant, Dead Inside, and Return to Monkey. Are you ready for the debate, everyone? Yeah. Now, let's start with Paglia. I think Camille Paglia is 70% full of shit. However, the 30% I'm going to use to back up my argument today is her belief that with the rise of masculine intelligence, the decrease of feminine virtue goes. Now, I don't say virtue in the way Andrew Tate would think of feminine virtue, where I'm saying like, oh, good women back in the olden days, but more so the whole thing that when the Enlightenment happened, women didn't exactly get the best end out of it. Now, the so-called Enlightenment was also overlapping quite a bit with the witch burnings that tore through puritanical America and Europe. Don't you think it's a little strange that the so-called Enlightenment led to mass hysteria about women who had knowledge about, a lot of the time, midwifery and medicine and herbs?
What information?
Yes.
The recent witch burning is not carried out by Puritan Christians who rejected Enlightenment thought.
I'm saying that the Enlightenment, which is the period, and not the Enlightenment philosophers, contained witch burning. These two things were going on at the very same time, and I 100% think that the increase of emphasis on law and science, see, law and science is supposed to have had an absolute golden age during this time, you know, its increases were, you know,
quite extensive, actually. But for some reason, women in this time period saw a decrease in both law, because, you know, not too much law going on with witch burnings, I'll be honest. It was very mass hysteria going on. And medicine, the art of herbs and hippie medicine got lost during this era. I like to think of it, you know how if you get misogynist enough, you go gay, right? We all know about that. That's how I see the Enlightenment. Because, listen. It's Kant, for example. You cannot convince me at all that man was not fruity. He hated women so much that it's suspicious. I think it's suspicious, personally. And I mean, Isaac Newton, so-called died a virgin. My man was writing gay-ass love letters. That man was ridiculous. And I mean, if gay people are getting created by the Enlightenment, I just can't support that kind of lifestyle. I'm sorry, guys. On to one of my favorite headings, dead inside. I want you all to look at me and tell me that you are not dead inside. Try! Tell me that third level education is to your liking. Tell me that the advance of science and education and further learning has benefited us in any feasible way. I don't believe it. I think that honestly built up society was a mistake, and we should, say it with me now, return to monkey. I say go the complete opposite direction. I don't want enlightenment. I don't want science. I don't want medicine. I don't want people living longer. I don't want rights. I just kind of want to eat berries a little bit. As someone who has the spice tolerance of a hunter-gatherer, it seems fitting that I should fit my lifestyle around that, and I genuinely believe it would benefit us as a society if we went to that place together. I think it would be good. So that is why I ask that you support the House in this movement. Thank you. I surrender.
Thank you, Doctor. If you were being marked, we would have given you full marks. Next speaker is Jack.
You spelled the name wrong.
All
All right, okay. Okay.
Jack, a round of applause for
This actually, like, I had a whole intro sort of prepared for this, but this kind of ties into it a little bit, Jacqueline's speech, about LARPing. To begin, I must say I do understand the proposition's stance of regretting the Enlightenment. Overt contrarian LARPing is always fun. I am often guilty of it myself. I love a bit of a wind-up, especially a few pints in. I often take great joy in telling people I identify as an anarcho-primitivist, as Jacqueline was describing, and watching the creases of their face contort as they desperately try and read my expression in order to find out how many levels of irony they have to dig through before they can have like an actual human, like, being conversation with me. My own mildly neurodivergent tendencies aside, outwardly opposing the Enlightenment is a ridiculous stance to take. In nearly all of my philosophical reasonings on metaphysical issues, I personally enjoy the obsession of Descartes with epistemological uncertainty within our understandings of the world around us. The faith-based philosophical models of the pre-Enlightenment era, of the pre-Enlightenment era undermine this. The modern employment of skepticism has brought us to the comfortable intellectual world in which you and I live in today. Reason and our ability to freely engage with it is a privilege as a result of the Enlightenment. Reason by its nature is anthropocentric and humanistic. That was brought up before by Owen, I understand that, but we can through this see that the Enlightenment is a natural philosophical evolution from faith-centric ideology. This is not to say faith is bad or wrong, but we can more helpfully now see, as Tom said, faith as a separate albeit useful tool for some, myself included occasionally, tool like reason and logic. It's not something that's better than reason or logic, or even less than the reason and logic. It is another tool that we can utilize in our philosophical, like, tool belt, like Batman, you know what I mean? Like, faith is not destroyed through the Enlightenment, as Tom said, once again, in the same way that the tyrants who use faith aren't either. It is merely a fact that the world was presented with an alternative in the form of liberal democratic models that many accepted. Now, although central critics of the Enlightenment from within the Frankfurt School deduced that because reason, in their view, is always aiming towards harnessing control over aspects of nature that benefit the person doing the reasoning, that if employed inappropriately, reason in this form can be reconstituted in order to perpetuate fascist ideology. In our extremely interconnected modern contemporary society, this is very true, especially in the past 200 years. In response to this, I posit the following line of questioning. Could it not be argued that fascism absolutely existed before the Enlightenment, before Enlightenment thinking? The subjugation of the peasant in a society of serfdom can hardly be described as anything but fascism.
On that point,
Go on.
that was a feudalistic society, which is different from a fascist society. A fascist society which for scapegoat and other, no feudalistic society really did that in any meaningful way.
If you'd allow me to finish, I'll get to that point. Okay. The subjugation of the peasant in a society of serfdom can hardly be described as anything but fascism. Just getting to where I am. Yes. We did not see a definitive rise within the Western sphere of liberal democracy until there was a philosophical zeitgeist that allowed for the identification of fascism. You can hope for a better life, or you can't hope for a better life if you do not have the epistemological capability, or rather feel you don't have the capability to seek one, to perceive one. On a more minimal note, the criticism like that of which is presented by the Frankfurt School, which characterises Enlightenment thinking as the black and white logical thinking of old, maintains what I believe is a fear from the non-empiricist that the most valid and reasonable philosophical ethics system simply may not directly and immediately provide a sense of instant gratification to the individual that employs it. The anti-communitarian who opposes reason and logic as a result of this, in my opinion, is selfish and weak-willed. Cower, whinge and cry all you want, but the Enlightenment gave you the mind to choose a life for yourself, the voice to argue for that life. By expressing your regret for the Enlightenment and subscribing willingly to archaic philosophical systems of faith, you are availing directly of the benefits of the Enlightenment. Do you seek to remove your own right to choose? Yes, that's right. One of the key components on post-Enlightenment thought is liberty. And given that the defense of liberty is always beaten to death in a very uninteresting way, let me present an idea to you. Much of the facts of post-Enlightenment thought are the essential logical safeguards that progressed our ideology in the Western world towards our modern relationship with societal values. The appeal for discourse is all well and good, but do you want to live in a society where, now being free of rational logical method, which comes so naturally, we have to defend ourselves against archaic societal horrors that we have since, with reason, deduced to be unacceptable? The millisecond the Enlightenment occurs, these horrors obviously didn't just evaporate into the air. Rape and murder and racism existed thousands of years before, and they exist in the modern day, and they probably will continue to exist. But without the tools for reason and the desire for liberty that many of these thinkers gave us, we will be doomed to forever be slaves to these institutional horrors. With this, you simply do not want better for people. You dismiss the power of the scientific revolution. You condemn those around you to a life of peasantry, poor in material, poor in mind, and poor in soul. To oppose the Enlightenment, you are in direct contradiction of the beauty of the indomitable human spirit. I don't see how in your speech the development of the individual is in any way benefited from the Enlightenment. If anything, is any way benefited from a pre-Enlightenment period. The Enlightenment was the absolute ability in epistemological logic to even have the tools to express that desire for individuality. The art of the individual mastery of the soul, of ethics, of reason. It all comes from the Enlightenment. Go forth and live in fear of the self-actualized man, the mighty contrarian. Do as you will. I and other appreciators of the Enlightenment and the gifts it has given us will even fight for your right to do so. But when the gavel of totalitarianism falls again on the Western world, your spiritual grave will be your own. Thank you.
So I'm actually going to be third. Competition really hard.
Can you all hear me? Can you all see me? First, I'd like to start with a rebuttal or two. First, you said logic was brought to the forefront when it came to the Enlightenment. This is false. Historically, it was brought to the forefront by the Greeks. The term logic even comes from the Greek word logos. They developed mathematics, arithmetic, Pythagoras, his own theorem. So that's it. Then you later went on to say reason is a loss of religion, but not completely. Even Jack said this. They're non-competitive things. Reason and faith, they just exist side by side. What does that mean? Nothing, literally. What they're arguing for is for nothing to have any values, a vacuum of values. That's all the Enlightenment offers you. Enlightenment offers you nothing good, nothing bad. Enlightenment offers you reason.
On that point,
go ahead.
The Enlightenment offers you the ability to develop your own moral ethics sets in order to find those values for yourself instead of them being given to you. Also, on your point about the Greeks inventing logic. Okay, right now. Just the first
I want to point out a logical fallacy in Jack's own ethics system that he pointed out earlier. Pointed out by an Enlightenment philosopher himself. You said ethical empiricism. Empirical ethics, I mean. This is impossible because all empirical facts derive from descriptive means. Hume himself said you cannot derive the way something ought to be from the way something is. Completely, logically, reasonably impossible. So, on to what I'm actually saying instead of rebuttals.
Point of information.
What are the effects of the Enlightenment? It reduces world understanding to being material, rational, historical, boring. No, silence. This began with Descartes. Is cogito, I think. What I think is what matters. What I reason is what matters. What I can see before me. Me, I. It's a very powerful descriptive thing, so it is. You see this with the rise of medicine. Beautiful thing, supposedly. But what does this truly do for most people? It makes them slaves. Slaves of their passions, slaves of their urges. Because didn't Hume himself say reason is a slave to the passions? To think this way, that reason can tell you everything about the way that the world should be. Tells you nothing but the way you yourself are.
On that point.
No. You yourself are. And if you cannot understand yourself, how can you possibly act in the world? And more, the Enlightenment speaks quite deeply of autonomy. They would have you oppress yourself. They spoke much of the influence of others over you. The Enlightenment did. They do not want you to be a true master of yourself, a true master of all the things within you that are horrific.
On that point?
No.
Darken.
They offer happiness, they offer luxuries, they offer medicines. All supposedly wonderful things. With one hand, they take all these beautiful things, and with the other one, they rip away any chance you have of true freedom, of true liberty. I say, look at them. Look at as they indulge in their luxuries. They grow fat and old under the heel of their false god reason. They serve a life of mere satisfaction. Do not accept this reality, the chains they offer you. What I say, take suffering that is in life, that is coming for you all, bear up underneath it, and in doing so you become more than anything you could have imagined. I understand does not sound pleasant. The other option they offer is happiness. Wonderful thing. The happiness road. Don't go down that road, folks. Down the happiness road, there's a lot of bodies. Don't. People glorify this word happiness. Happiness and fulfillment are not the same. And here's the big lie. The big lie that started in the Enlightenment and is here today. that we all have dreams, we all have a vision, and all that's missing is execution. Hustle it up, as Gary Vee would say, as Andrew Tate would say. You'll be happy once you get it. But what is it? What is it? Shh. They get very, very quiet when they're asked these things, because these are the deep, deep questions of life that they are unable to answer. When the truth is, not everybody has an equal dream. There's not a million geniuses, there's only 2 or 3 of them.
On that point.
No, barracking, I think. But what happens when you're not this wonderful genius of the world, but you're told that you should be? You realise the world has played you some crazy trick. You realise you're owed an empire. You realise that my happiness will come at the expense of whatever person I can put beneath my boot. As first speaker did say, Napoleon himself massacred essentially millions. Nazi Germany, millions. Russia, millions. Cambodia, many, many, many more. Nothing matters but execution, literally, to these people. What I say is that we master ourselves. We learn the issues that we have before us. So not with logic, reason at the top, because it cannot be at the top. And there must be a supreme value to order all other values within yourself. Within yourself is the issue. So it is. And how do we come at this? We come at this, instead of cogito, I think, as Descartes would say, cogitamus, we think. You master yourself so that you can help your brother and sister beside you. You help your friend beside you, you help your mother, you help your father, you help your whole family, you help your community. Instead of this nihilistic, horrific, enlightenment thought that is false. I would say, very, very simply in ending, please vote for who you could be. Vote for who everybody could be around you. Do not vote in the name of massacred children. Do not vote in the name of massacred many people. Do not vote in the name of falsehood. Vote for virtue.
The first speaker would have you believe that we live in the past, in the dark, in the age of enlightenment. Rather, we argue that the Enlightenment was a building block for the future, a catalyst for change, and while not perfect, an embryonic form of society today. What is the age of enlightenment? As my colleague Tom used, I will be using a quote of Kant. It's arguably summed up that it was mankind's escape from his self-imposed tutelage. The Enlightenment was a coming of age for humanity, the realization of reason, a breakaway from faith and monarchy and the entrance of the modern social and political conscience. I am going to present to you how unbearable the world would have been had we not had the age of enlightenment. And then you could decide who to agree with. The defenders of modern civilization or the latter-day Luddites sitting across from me. I will argue the case for enlightenment on 3 points: the triumph of democracy, the age of scientific reason, and the beginnings of feminism. The Enlightenment paved a path to modern-day democracy. Without the Enlightenment, we would be governed by an even worse combination of inbred, incompetent idiots, the royal family as opposed to the Tories. Many argue that the Enlightenment was born in France, with the writings of philosopher Voltaire kickstarting it. He defended the efficacy of reason as the main force behind the Enlightenment. To regret the Enlightenment is therefore to regret reason. Voltaire and other French Enlightenment thinkers believed in the efficacy of reason, so much so that they began the French Revolution of 1789, in which King Louis and his cake-loving wife were swiftly decapitated, symbolising the start of the Western world's outright rejection of traditional monarchy and the birth of modern democracy. Now, I am not celebrating the decapitation of the aristocratic classes or the guillotine. Simply, I am stating that the Age of Enlightenment created the secular state which valued the working and middle class needs over the wants and desires of aristocrats. I realise that that is hard to recognise in Northern Ireland, a state entwined in religious sentiments, where elections are ignored by politicians who refuse to work and still get paid. Perhaps they will make some ground up. They're only 33 years behind after all. The Northern Ireland Age of Enlightenment is perhaps still to come, and I welcome it. The Age of Enlightenment made way for the scientific age. The weakening of Christianity's hold on power and governance allowed for modern and science-led theses to apply.
On that point,
Yes.
the Renaissance, which was a big scientific movement and already happened about 150 years before the Enlightenment, could it not be argued that actually scientific progress and Enlightenment are two completely separate issues which happened to occur around about the same time?
Well, I'm going to argue that the weakening of the Catholic Church's power allowed for scientific theories to become widely recognised. What Galileo had started and had been persecuted for by the Catholic Church in the 1600s, in the Age of Enlightenment became more readily accepted. Without the Enlightenment, the Catholic Church would have had the power to arrest and detain anyone challenging the ideas and teachings of the Bible. It was only with New Age thinking of Rousseau, Voltaire and Locke could these scientific advancements be made.
On that point?
No. In fact, medical evidence-based approaches only became acceptable as a result of the Enlightenment. If this House was to regret the Enlightenment, it would be an abject rejection of science in the Literary and Scientific Society of Queen's University, Belfast. Without the Enlightenment, the advances of modern medicine and science, medical evidentiary ethics could be based on the idea of mere miracles as opposed to observable evidence as was championed by Hunter. My final point in support of the Enlightenment is that of feminism. I will not stand before you and claim falsely that the Enlightenment was a watershed for women's rights, that feminism was achieved by the early 1800s. That would be incorrect and disingenuous to the struggles still faced by women and members of the LGBTQ+ communities today. However, the Enlightenment opened the way for tentative and necessary steps by the patriarchal societies of the day. Classical liberalism promoted egalitarian ideologies which guaranteed fundamental rights and freedoms of every individual, which should never be infringed upon by governments. No, thank you.
No, you're not.
Furthermore, the idea of universal suffrage was introduced, which before the Enlightenment would have been unheard of. I am not saying that all of these ideals have been achieved for feminism, not even today, especially if we look to women's voting rights in Qatar or the overturning of Roe v. Wade. However, it was these fundamental principles of the rights of man which inevitably led way for the idea that women and those who did not fit gender norms could also enjoy those rights. No, even Rousseau spoke about the gross inequalities women faced. Many of these thinkers, including Rousseau, acknowledged the inequalities that women faced, but accepted that men were simply more equal than women. It was this very acceptance and complacency about the inequalities of women which began the feminist movement, at least in the West. Wollstonecraft's most famous book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, is a direct attack of Rousseau's complacency. So while many male Enlightenment figures did not directly improve women's rights, they helped to amplify the issue in their acceptance of the injustices that the patriarchal system of governance in society perpetrated. Indeed, had it not been for the seeds sown in the Age of Enlightenment, perhaps I would not be here competing today. Forgive me, therefore, if I reject this House's proposition that we regret the Enlightenment. I make my case based on political, scientific, and feminist viewpoints, and I have utilised the Enlightenment's very own efficacy of reason to do so. I hope that you join me in protecting modern thought and consciousness, and indeed the very good name of our literific society in voting against this motion.
pleasure in the final speaker for the proposition of the next round.
Hello all. So, I've kind of been listening to a lot of speeches here, and I'm coming to a conclusion that there's this sort of idea, the Enlightenment happened, and so we had a very religious, Catholic Church-led society. We had great figures like Pope Francis, St. Francis of Assisi, Pope Gregory the 19th, and many religious saints and the like, giving ideas. So effectively a bunch of dead white guys, and their opinions were replaced by Kant, Nietzsche, Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, and René Descartes. So we've shifted the opinions of one group of dead white guys and replaced them with a completely different group of dead white guys. So society, we have made an enormous, enormous stride. But look, regarding the Enlightenment itself, in 1968 there was the Paris rail strikes, and the Paris rails did not operate at all. Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai was asked about these strikes, and he said it was too early to tell the effects of them 4 years later. Western journalists unfortunately misheard and thought that he was talking about the French Revolution. So Zhou Enlai gave an exceptionally nuanced and informed statement saying that it was too early to tell the effects of the French Revolution. The French Revolution was a direct result of the Enlightenment, and I think that's where we currently stand with the Enlightenment. It is actually long-term, too early to tell the effects of it. From about the death of Emperor Constantine, whenever the Roman Empire became Christian, through to the period of the Enlightenment, we had a relatively stable society where, yes, there were problems, yes, you had sometimes the odd religious war, but the general population were not involved. Generally, the population themselves actually had a fairly peaceful, leisurely life. Ever since the Enlightenment, let's look at what happened. We had the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, World War I, World War II, the Ukrainian War, the Vietnamese War, more death and destruction, more arms, more munitions, and this has been pitched as we made scientific advancement, we brought in this modern, wonderful world, and I think we thought maybe we could rather than maybe should we. We have created a society now which is far less safe and far less habitable than the one that existed before, all because of Enlightenment thought and what came about. So we have to ask ourselves, can we truly not regret something that made the world more dangerous and long-term more unstable? And I think that it's unreasonable to say that we should. Now, the great victory of the Enlightenment has often been pitched as democracy, and we hear multiple times about how brilliant democracy is, and no longer do we have to listen to the views of one individual and his opinion. Yes?
Can you define what you mean by stability?
Well, I would define stability as a system of world existence that goes on continuous, not one where we've got continual crisis after crisis after crisis. We now live in a state era of permacrisis nowadays. How can we move beyond that? We need to actually look at the Enlightenment, what it got wrong, so we can improve going forward. But the big victory of the Enlightenment has been pitched as democracy. Democracy is this wonderful thing that brought our society into the 21st century, into the modern world. And this has been seen as this wonderful, fantastic thing, where everyone's opinion is automatically seen as equal, and everyone's opinion is seen as better. This here is a small piece of modern art that I drew earlier, okay? I call it the broken millennial, okay? In my opinion, the broken millennial is a masterpiece equivalent to the Sistine Chapel, okay? My opinion would be held in any society in the modern world as valid as anyone else's. In reality, this here piece is not as good as the Sistine Chapel, but any idiot can now go and say anything and their opinion is seen as equal. That is what Enlightenment thought came to. It was designed to bring about more reason, more nuance, more analytical thinking, but the reality is it has not opened up that opportunity. How can we not regret a system which suddenly created opinions that are not worth warranting or having? It's insanity. Anyway, we have heard an awful lot tonight about the separation of church and state and how this was a good thing that happened from the Enlightenment. And what the opposition have effectively done is they have taken little bits of the Enlightenment, little bits of enlightened thought that they thought were good, they thought were worthwhile talking about. And I'll acknowledge, everything has its merits. I've been to Moscow. Stalin built the Moscow Underground. It's amazing. Brilliant underground. I got around Moscow in no time. You know something? Stalin did bring about a great underground, but that doesn't mean he was a great guy overall. And that's effectively how they've looked at the Enlightenment. They've nitpicked certain bits of the Enlightenment they liked and said, that's what we're going to go with going forward. That justifies the entire thing. When in actuality, the Enlightenment hasn't brought anything but more suffering for humanity and more dread in the long term. Yes?
I find it really interesting that you continue to bring up all of the deaths that have occurred post kind of Enlightenment thinking. John, let's talk about how John M. Robertson, a very respected historian in the 1830s, estimated that up to 9 million people died during the Crusades in the name of God. So if we're talking about ignoring church and state being separated as a good thing, well, what's 9 million people?
9 million people, it is a big figure. Yes, it is a big figure. I will acknowledge that, okay. However, if we go and look across the entirety of the time before the Enlightenment, the death rate is going to be coming in at far lower than that, because ultimately what the Enlightenment did was create a society where it was more easy for us to take advantage of those that are horrible catastrophes. Now, Tom Burns has talked about the Enlightenment in its link to philosophy and its way of thinking. And what we heard is how it's created a world where we're more reasoned, more analytical, look at things on a more individualistic level. And we heard from my colleague in the first proposition earlier, I do not fight a war to expand France's borders, but her ideals. But what he meant was his ideals. Napoleon meant his ideals, and what we can see from the Enlightenment is that we've created a society obsessed with the individual, individualistic aims, one man's ambition. The individual takes precedent over society. We now have a society where you look at big men who take their own ideals and push them onto all of society, rather than society operating the other way around. And we ultimately have to ask, what do we care for more, the society or individual? And thus far, we are moving towards the individual. Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, Johnson, Bolsonaro, all big men born out of the so-called enlightened democracies that we live in now. Well, I have to ask, how enlightened really are these democracies whenever individuals can take advantage in far more damaging ways than any feudalistic king ever could? Look, the Enlightenment ideology itself is fundamentally toxic. It looks at the individual, it takes away from society, it claims to promote reason and analysis, but in actuality simply promotes mediocrity and bad viewpoints. It's European central. I have to ask, yes, the Enlightenment might have resulted in a lot of people getting a lot wealthier in Europe, but did it really benefit Africa? Did it benefit the North American Indians? The simple answer is no. Enlightenment brought to them misery, pain, suffering, and death. So to look at the Enlightenment, we have to look at it as a flawed model. But going forward, and I will finish now, going forward beyond the Enlightenment, Hegel had a philosophy called the philosophy of history. We would look back on our past and we would regret everything and go, how could we improve that? How could we make it better? Long term going forward, we must regret the Enlightenment if we intend to make a better post-Enlightenment society. Thank you.
It's one of the honest here for the German.
First of all, it feels like it's been ages since I've spoken in front of you all, and by that I mean like 2 weeks. But you know, that's a long time in Dermot time. The proposition not know how this House regrets motion works. Because the idea is that you put forward a world where we didn't have the Enlightenment. That is the entire point of this House regrets motion. Where was it? Now, let's actually look at the points they made. So Jacqueline made a brilliant, very interesting point about witches. Witches are pretty cool. It is actually estimated, according to most historians, that more witch burnings happened in between the year 1500 and 1660, before the Enlightenment was really believed to have come into its own 25 years earlier. So, if we're all talking about witch burnings, should we not talk about the ones that came first? I loved this brilliant quote from Luke Maguire. I thought it was brilliant. Vote for who you could be. Vote for who you could be. Let us be the person that lives up to our own true potential. That's how I listen to that quote. Vote for what you could do in this world. Vote for maybe making the world a better place, not just for yourself, but for all those around you, in the communitarian ethics of modern enlightened thinking. Vote for putting yourself first. Vote for raising a family. Vote for having a really lovely house. Vote for wearing quite comfortable shirts. And vote for having Daniel McCormick complain about you wearing comfortable shirts. Vote for love. Vote for the ability to love whoever you want. Vote for human rights. Vote for yourself. Vote for the opposition.
I'd also just, I raised a point of information on the 9 million people that died during the Crusades, which, now that doesn't sound a lot in terms of modern kind of warfare. We've heard of much worse over the years, but if you put that into perspective of how many people, and Oaken's smiling, how many people lived in the world at that period, it's estimated roughly in that time period in 1200, just towards the end of the Crusades, that 293 million people lived in the world. So if 9 million people dropped dead today, it wouldn't be a massive drop in the ocean, but back then that was 3% of the world's population. So that's 210 million people. No thanks.
On that point,
go for it.
yeah, the Crusades did, however, happen over 300 years. So, you've got to look at it then of looking at the population over all that time. So it's only down to 1%, which is, it's not brilliant, I'm not going to lie. But let's compare it to the UK population, the enlightened population in the UK with not the pandemic. All of a sudden, it doesn't look that bad.
So, hold on, so it's 1%. So that's 70 million people dropping dead. Okay. That's an interesting take. But my friends, why am I in favour of the Enlightenment? Me that LARPs is a somehow homophobic gay man, why would he be in favour of separating church and state? Well, as much as I LARP as the homophobic gay man, I look to the Enlightenment for the freedoms we enjoy today as individuals. And I look to this brilliant quote I heard the other day from Kira Swale, HLM. We all need orgies. Something that we can enjoy in modern and an enlightened world, compared to the one which the opposition were meant to portray, in which we would all live in our nice feudalistic society, or live in a world where we can't allow scientific, I suppose, exploration and development because of, the jackboot of the Catholic Church, so we can all die of cholera. Go for it, my friend.
First of all, how did you get communitarianism from my quote? Well, moving on. You're fearing that we set the scope of the debate, the proposition, not the opposition. So when you're talking about first proposition, not saying things exactly right when it came to, we regret the Enlightenment.
So what you're saying is because you set the scope of the debate, you're just not going to debate the motion? Okay, that's an interesting one. No. Point of clarification, if it is a point of clarification, go for it.
I've been misconstrued by a couple of people. What I said is that we do not forget the Enlightenment happened, we are here to move on to it.
That's not how it works, but go for it. So let's regret the Enlightenment. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. So we can all live under the jackboot of the Catholic Church. So for all of our gays, that's going to be great because they've been really big fans of LGBT rights, particularly marriage and existence and contraception and all of those wonderful things that we enjoy. So Kira, I'm afraid no more orgies. But I also want to talk about political freedom and what has been granted by modern political thought and modern philosophy. I'm going to refer to, and I know that you're all going to love this, I'm going to refer to the Donnybrook Rats. Now, a few weeks ago, in my first speech, I stood before you and I spoke in their defence. Something that, quite likely, without the modern development of philosophy, we may not have, because we have, as a result of the Enlightenment, developed a university where we discuss enlightened views. We may not have had that. Now, I agree, from my knowledge, there was at least one debating society that existed pre-Enlightenment, which is the University Philosophical Society at Trinity. So tell me what you think of them. So, if you want to hold on to pre-Enlightened views, go for it. The Enlightenment helped us break from tradition, helped us break from subservience, provided us freedom. There is no reason to succumb to pre-Enlightened thought. There is no reason to respect tradition simply because it is tradition. Why should we succumb to the decisions made by dead men? It makes no sense. We do not wish to stagnate the Enlightenment, as the proposition would have you believe.
We wish to take the Enlightenment and we wish to move forward with it. We wish to maintain the philosophy that it has provided us with. We wish to use that to develop our world for the better, because why wouldn't we? To regret the Enlightenment is to neglect our own abilities. It is to regret the freedoms we now enjoy, to regret the emergence of human rights, to regret the nation state, to regret modern art, music, literature. Now, Olkin, you kind of railed against modern art. Well, I'll give you 5p for that. To regret the Enlightenment is to regret love. My friends, for the sake of freedom, for the sake of democracy, oppose this motion.
Quiet, please! So this debate is being judged, so the judges, including myself, are going to retire to judge. In the meantime, Josie will be taking our question section, so proposition first, opposition, and abstention. Yeah. So give Josie a big hand as well, please.
Well done to all of the speakers tonight. Your speeches were really, really great. So does anyone have a question for the proposition here? Yes? You just don't even bother saying your name, I'm not writing it down. So.
I think I was just a bit confused by the fact that it felt like a lot of the proposition's points from Enlightenment thinkers. Like you quoted David Hume and Descartes, which are both Enlightenment thinkers, and supported their idea. You talked about many individualistic ideas. You talked about the human spirit. All of those things were things discussed and promoted by. It was either you or you talked about the human spirit. These are all ideas promoted by Enlightenment thinkers, and without the Enlightenment, you wouldn't even be able to promote that idea. So,
Okay, I use an iPhone. Okay, I criticize Apple. So does that mean I shouldn't? So like, why do I engage in society? Why do I use an iPhone? I feel like I don't know if I was able to get across what I was trying to say with this debate correctly. In fact, I know I did because I printed out the wrong copy. No. The way I took this motion to mean was that this House regrets the Enlightenment, and that the Enlightenment is still something that's here with us, and we're trying to move on from that. Okay, so it's not that we're getting rid of the Enlightenment thought. It's that today we shouldn't be thinking that people thought 400 years ago. We should be trying to move on. That makes any sense. That's it.
Opposition to respond?
I use an Android. That's not how this Session of QUB motion works, and that's it. That's
No. It's just, does anyone have a question for the opposition? Jamie?
So I think one point that was made in the opposition is the sort of how the Enlightenment has basically been this sort of paradigm of freedom and sort of moving in the right direction for the rights. If you look at the Enlightenment, which came about in the 18th and 17th centuries, for a good century and a half after that, you still had scientific racism in the United States and apartheid in South Africa until the early 1990s. So that sort of disproves your point that the Enlightenment ushered in this new era of freedom.
I directly addressed that in my speech. The mere introduction of individualist thought does not completely wipe out all of the societal horrors of old in one fell swoop. I don't think that was the assertion that me or anybody on my team was trying to make. The fact that these things still exist, we're working in a very small time frame. If you say that when the Enlightenment began, that these things still existed right after the Enlightenment. Unfortunately, philosophical movements take a minute, and I feel like we have come to a place now where these types of issues are being resolved. The mere fact that you even identify that these are issues is as a result of Enlightenment thinking. I feel that it's a very fair point, but what I'm saying is that we should not regret the Enlightenment, for it has given us the tools and parameters and the logic and the reasoning through Cartesian skepticism to understand that scientific racism, anti-feminism are bad things.
Okay, proposition to respond?
Well, the problem you seem to have is you're talking about the Enlightenment, you're for the Enlightenment obviously, but you're talking about it evolving, which would require something outside of Enlightenment, superior to the Enlightenment is serving. But, as you said, you mentioned the Cartesian method to it. That itself is a logical circle, that is a fallacy, does not work, it doesn't. If you're relying on an arbitrary, outside, nigh on supernatural force, how on earth is that Enlightenment? It is inherently contradictory to the Enlightenment itself. Your notion that your point you made relies on something almost quasi-supernatural, quasi-religious. It's almost like once you get rid of the Catholic Church, the biggest mysteries will seem like nothing compared to the reason before us of the fact that it works.
Okay. Got an abstention question? Yeah, you at the back there.
Thanks. I think it's just a question regarding science. I think science was discussed by the opposition as science is all good. Yeah, science. Woo, let's do science. Science was discussed by the proposition as well, take my faith. But if we run with what the opposition says science is only good, and we use science all the time, we're looking at good things. Well, can you say that science, in fact, and the Enlightenment unleashed science's potential? There's so many dystopian novels that are based on science, and what science can do when it's unrestrained. The atomic bomb, argued that science led to that. Oppenheimer said, I am death become me, when he utilized the atomic bomb, climate change. Science and the Enlightenment's role in unleashing science has ultimately, I would argue, led to our extinction.
Was that not an abstention question? Well,
as well, because they argue science, not really like to the full extent. They argue science.
I mean, you can have a go. Yeah. Proposition first, and then.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, it is hypothetical. Ultimately, has it led to our extinction? And I'm not going to claim it has led to our extinction because our extinction hasn't happened yet. But one of the things, and I wish I made a speech now actually, was that one of the things about science is it brought in this idea if something is tangible, it was there, you could touch it, you could see it, you could observe it, then we could come up and answer. But actually, science solves a lot of interesting questions, but it actually doesn't solve it answers how, but it doesn't actually answer why, and that's what the Enlightenment turned against. It actually turned against why. Like, I could pick up a rock tomorrow and I could say made by God on it, highly unlikely, but I could do that tomorrow. We have stopped actually asking why. If we can't observe and actually see something, is it there? And that is actually worrying that our society gave that up simply for the Enlightenment. And now, however, I'm going to actually go and prove that there is a God. So, God, if you're with us right now, make no sign at all.
Opposition?
If I can, I said myself, modern science is never finished. There is always more to know. Science is not sacrosanct. No one believes that science is sacrosanct. Science changes all the time. Science has done an awful lot of good. It's done some bad. It's done an awful lot of good and bad on both. But science always changes. Science develops itself. That is a product of the Enlightenment. That's what allows us. And I think it's important because this debate hasn't fully gone about the way it probably should have, and that without having the development of science through the Enlightenment, there are no questions asked at all about how or why, let alone answers posed or posed and taken wrong, or no theories, no hypotheses. That's all we have. Under complete religious diktat of pre-Enlightenment thinking, there is no thought, because the big man upstairs did the whole thing, and that's the end of discussion.
Well, I think that ended perfectly because, nope, never mind, they haven't come back yet. Okay. We can do one more round. So anyone got a question for the proposition then? No. Daniel?
From an Enlightenment perspective, can both his own teammates and those on the other side make comment from the Enlightenment perspective on Lucia? Because I feel like it's an important point. It's been a sticking point, and for me, been the balance of this particular sidewalk.
On Lucia. I feel like I should take this one.
From the Enlightenment perspective. From the Enlightenment perspective. Wasn't against such things. So the Enlightenment would have you believe that I should not be wearing a shirt that has little buttons here. It's too casual apparently. The Enlightenment in this authoritarian spirit that would not let me wear the clothes I choose to wear. They would not let you think the way you want to think, the way you should think. They need to be reasonable. I say, why not be who you could be? Why not wear the shirt you want? Why not think the way you want?
From the perspective on Luke's shirt, the individualism that thank you for the Enlightenment would probably agree with Luke that Luke should be allowed to wear his shirt. But if you look at it from the other perspective of anti-Enlightenment, I think God would tell us that, and God probably acting through the form of Daniel McCormick, that Luke should not wear his shirt. And I'd like to point out, just for the record, that I was due to give a POI to Luke about his tie, and I was going to offer him a compliment about his tie through the form of a POI, and he rejected that. So
I just apologise. I'm sorry for derailing this.
I mean, Luke, do you want to accept the POI now? Since
Yes,
you know
I
that.
Yes, good sir.
So, any questions for the opposition? You there in the blue shirt?
Yeah, so I came up knowing too much about the Enlightenment, but from anything, it seems to be the elevation of the self over everything else, where I get to shape my reality, I'm the master of my own ship. But what would you say to someone who says that the world would be better if there was objective good, there was objective wrong, there is objective beauty, there's objective justice, there is hope, and we as a society, as a nation, as a people, have a duty to move towards the nature of that justice and the nature of that hope.
Under the central tenets of Enlightenment thinking, you are entirely within your right to subscribe to those beliefs. I feel that if that's what you want to believe, and if that's where you find the most faith in your life from finding, 100%. The Enlightenment provides an alternative to all of us who do not subscribe to those beliefs and wish to develop our own moral subset, develop our own sense of beauty. An issue I actually took with something that the opposition said earlier was that it was based on the thoughts of my opposition. Okay, my opposition was that it's a lot of it is built on the philosophy of dead white men. I feel like my favourite philosophy, post-Enlightenment, does not come from old dead white men. It comes from South African Ubuntu ethics, in that within the individual we find communitarian spirit in willing engagement. I think it's beautiful. Just saying.
I think the same value. No, African socialism does not work.
Please explain to the audience any terms about political philosophy.
Ubuntu ethics is a very elitist form of socialism, but on the actual objective point, please. The issue that they like is it involves anybody from we're going to do the results.
Okay, who cares? Right. Well, you're not being marked on that, so you know what I mean. We have the winners in. Did I get at least a drum roll? Thank you. In first place.
Just the winner?
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Okay.
A drum roll again, please. Our winner of the Godkin 2022 is Katie Hughes.